The Tulsa Oilers are back on the ice, fresh off last year's playoff run and hungry for more. Saturday at 7:05 and again on Sunday at 4:05. Saturday is Youth Jersey Giveaway Night. The first 500 kids under 12 get a free jersey, courtesy of York Plumbing. Also on Saturday night, don't miss the Superstars. Tickets at TulsaOilers.com. That's TulsaOilers.com. Experience hard-hitting, glove-dropping, pulse-pounding, glass-rattling kind of thrill. Get your tickets now at TulsaOilers.com. This is your town, your team, your Tulsa Oilers hockey are back.
Zack Reynolds and Luke Hamilton here for another edition of the Pipeline Podcast, brought to you by OilFire Whiskey. This will kind of be a midway mark / all-star break recap on the first half of the season. And of course, coming into the year, you're coming off of a playoff berth. Took a really good Utah team to 7 games as well, along with that. And here, you're sitting out of a playoff spot halfway through the year, but it's still the possibility that you can find yourself in a situation of making the playoffs. Of course, with Idaho playing so well here this season, it's been a bit of a gap in comparison to what we've seen over the last few years. Something I find interesting as well, just with the playoff picture, is that this is a tough division in terms of goal scoring. There's a lot of goal scoring and point getting going on. I mean, 5 of the top 7 players in the league, point total wise, play in the Mountain Division, and only one of those plays for Idaho. So it just kind of shows how much firepower there is.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest point you can make here at the halfway point of the season for the Oilers, and not only the Oilers, but the Mountain Division, is just how good this Idaho Steelheads team has been. And yet, from an individual standpoint, there's still plenty in the Mountain Division that sort of top the ranks. A lot of shot production from a lot of young players in the Mountain Division as well is something to look at. And, we can look a little bit at the numbers as to where we were at this point last year. Of course, the Oilers had, the All-Star break over this past week as well. And Eddie Matsushima, who has just come on the scene as one of the top players, not only for this team, but in the ECHL here right now, has had a star-studded season, and it's just his second year in the ECHL.
Yeah, and second full year in the league, and he's played extremely well. Of course, he leads the team with 28 points. He leads the team with 17 goals. Leads the team in plus-minus with a +5. Of course, very deserving of that All-Star berth. And then when he got there, he was able to score 2 goals in the All-Star game, so that was really exciting to see as well. And we talked about it with Murrapit, just about how Eddie was preparing so hard off the ice this year to make sure that he kind of reached that next level. And I think that's really all you can ask for out of a player when you kind of send them off for the summer, and he certainly answered that.
Yeah, I think Eddie Matsushima's speed is very evident. Of course, it was evident last year, but I think more so this year in regards to how long his speed is able to be effective on the ice. It's his stamina this year, right? I mean, he's conditioned himself to be the best possible player on the ice every shift, and you want to look at an example of a player that knows how to bring it every shift. It's Eddie Matsushima, and it's why he's an all-star, and it's why he puts up consistent numbers. He doesn't stay off the point sheet for too long, and I think you're rewarded when you're giving those efforts each and every night that are the same. Sometimes teams have a hard time of finding their identity because, well, you're not getting a consistent effort out of everybody every night, but you get a bunch of Eddie Matsushimas on the ice, you pretty much know what your team's going to look like. So it's been fun to watch him not only play, but play with some different line combinations. I think himself, along with Max Golod and Dante Sheriff, are a thing to come for a long time here for this team with that top line. And I like the production that he's been able to help Dante Sheriff produce as well, just with the forecheck and with the speed in transition. So be looking for Eddie Matsushima not just to put up accolades for himself this year, right? I mean, he's an all-star and he leads the team in points and goals, but he's going to make players around him better, which I think is the most important attribute you can have as a hockey player, especially at this point in the season with where we're at.
And we look at consistency, and it's something that's a little more inconsistent this year than last year, is goaltending. We talked about consistency of effort earlier when it came to players, and I don't think it's an effort issue when it comes to the goaltenders, and it's a position that's easy to be streaky in. It's way more mental than it is physical. last year, you rode Daniel Manella pretty much every game that he was available to be played in, and this year we've seen a bit of a rotation of goaltenders as well. But of course, Manella not having quite the season that he had last year, and that's a big difference, I think, between this team and last year's team is just the goaltending numbers.
Yeah, I think, an extra save here, an extra save there might get you, away from what we see on the right side of that standings column with the 6 overtime losses. Maybe some of those games don't have to go to overtime, or maybe you get that big save in overtime that helps you out. But it kind of is just the reality here right now. You look at a player like Daniel Manella. At this point in the season compared to last year, 11-3-0-1 record. He had a 9.21 save percentage and a 2.25 goals against. All-star numbers for Daniel Manella, and it's not quite there here this year, but the nice thing is head coach Rob Murray has said it over and over, and if you need a reminder, that netminder from last year is still there in Daniel Manella, and the work that he gets this year, I 100% expect him to turn it around with, because you've got Gage Alexander down here now, and you've got Colton Ellis, a St. Louis Blues contracted netminder, that are going to be battling for that net just as much, and I think it's important for Daniel Manella to recognize that as a key piece for his development is, hey, I've got some competition in net, and it's going to make me better.
Yeah, and all three goaltenders are different types of goaltenders when you look at it. Danny's kind of one of those really calm and really well-positioned and controlled goaltenders. Gage Alexander, obviously a very large goaltender, takes up a lot of net, but has pretty incredible athleticism for his size. And then Colton Ellis, as we know, we've talked about a lot, right? He's very, very good at being the type of goaltender that can play the puck and help your defenseman out. So it's strange, I think, maybe as a player to see the rotation of goaltenders coming in and out, but when there's not many guys playing consistently in terms of their production as goaltenders, then there's not going to be consistency on who's in the pipes, because you're going to have to keep swapping things out here and there. Yeah,
I think so, and you got to limit the mistakes in front of your netminders, right? I mean, that at the end of the day is going to hurt their ability to put up the numbers that you want, and Tulsa's been tightening it up defensively a little bit more so now than ever, and we've got a big weekend coming up here against Utah where you've got to make a statement in the sense that, hey, we can be a team that keeps the puck out of the net. It's a team that's at the bottom of the Mountain Division in the Grizzlies, and you got to be able to prove that you're better than some of these teams if you're wanting to sit in 4th out of 7th. I think the Oilers are excited for that opportunity. Guys like Eddie Matsushima are coming off of a fresh start here as an all-star now, but you look back just a year ago, Dylan Sadoway, he was going to go to the all-star game, injured, of course, and Jack DeRemus got an opportunity to be a part of that all-star game, but those were your 2 top players last season, Sadoway and DeRemus, and Sadoway's off to a bit of a slower start than we would have expected, but of course coming off of a season-ending injury last year, you look at the standings and you look at the numbers and he's quietly picking up points, but not the pace that he was last year, so you need some help, right? And Jack DeRemus elects to go to Germany, and you've got a player like Eddie Matsushima that is really the Dylan Sadoway of last year. We're at the 33-game mark here in the season, and where were the Oilers at the 33-game mark last year, just a season ago? Well, Dylan Sadoway led the team with 17 goals. Eddie Matsushima leads the team with 17 goals here right now. The funny thing about that just as well, you've got a player like Tyler Paulson that's an addition to this team. He currently leads the team with 18 assists, and well, a year ago, the defenseman, Dougie Legrone, was leading the team with 15 assists. And so you got some help from some different ways and some different angles, right? But relatively similar numbers in that regard. Sadoway led the team with 31 points by the 33-game mark last year, and Matsushima sitting at about 28. So you're looking at some numbers where you can sort of see who's going to be carrying a lot of the mail here for the team going down the stretch. And I think you got some of your guys for sure. Tyler Paulson's been fantastic. He has replaced the production, I think, of Jack DeRemus, maybe minus the goal-scoring production. And Eddie Matsushima is helping out a ton with being, well, what is his best professional year.
Yeah, it has been his best season for sure. And we take a look at a guy that's probably the most consistent from last season over to this year in terms of production and what he brings to the table. It's Jimmy Soper. He's got more goals at this point with the 13. He's got 11 assists. He's on pace for career highs in both of those throughout, if he were to just basically double everything up and go across the board. He obviously had his best season as a pro last year, his first full season in the ECHL. He played a full year in the SPHL, had some time in the ECHL of Greenville before coming over here. And I think what he brings to the table can't be understated. And it's not the flashiest style of play, but neither was Adam Pleskach, right, when he was producing. And those two guys obviously worked very well together when they played together at points last season. And I think that Soper is one of those guys that you kind of have to lean on here heading down the stretch.
Yeah, I think Soper is going to be a massive piece to the puzzle. Head coach Rob Murray wants a bit more forechecking out of this team, and Soper is somebody that's going to lead by example and bringing that aspect to his game. 13 goals, like you mentioned. That's exactly what you're asking for out of a 24-point player at this point in the season. And, he wants there to be a bit more spread, though, just as well. You're looking at guys to lead your team, but, you can't lead, you can't lead and not have people follow. It doesn't work that way. And so you kind of look at the spread from the 33-game point last year to this year, and what are some numbers that I in particular look at? Well, let's just start with the standings. The Oilers had 18 wins at this point in the season, an 18-14-0-1 record for 37 points. In fact, they sat second place in the Mountain Division at this point in the year. This year sitting in 7th out of 7 in the Mountain Division, but a weekend can turn things around, which is the nice thing about this team. 8 points less produced in the standings this year at this point. But there's always a turning point, and something that we talked about a bit going into playoffs last year was what are some valuable numbers to look at in the ECHL? Well, who's scoring 10 or more goals at this point in the year? Last year, the Oilers had 2 players that scored 10 or more goals. This year, well, they've got 2 just as well. So you've got a bit of a top heaviness in your goal production column just as well. Just a season ago, the Oilers had 11 players with 10 or more assists. There's only 8 this year that have done that. So needing to pick it up a little bit, I would say, on the forward depth side of things in that regard. I can't necessarily point out a single guy that I think could maybe emerge here in the second half, but I think that's the fun part about it is that somebody's going to prove it, and somebody's going to find a way to do that. At the end of the day. On average, each player at this point in the year just a season ago was averaging about 11.5 points, and the team averages about 9.5 points per player here this season. So just a point here or there. Who knows? That's the difference between some of these overtime games and the difference between one or 2 goals late in a game that you might need. So that's why I think this team is just right around the corner from being a team that they were last year at this point. It doesn't take much, but it just takes something.
And you look at the goal differentials as well. With last season, you had more goals for at the point, and you were allowing less goals against per game compared to this season. And obviously, that's not a recipe that's going to put you ahead of where you were last year, unless your division has had that go across the board, or the league has had that go across the board. So with that being the case, that kind of leans back to the goaltending situation. You would think a little bit when it comes to goals against, but also the defensemen, not as maybe shut down as they were last season. A big reason for that, though, I mean, you've seen Mike McKee miss 12 games already this year,
right.
and hopefully we'll be back sooner rather than later. Of course, he's your new captain after not having Adam Pleskach available here with the visa issue. So I see that if the goaltending situation could become a bit more consistent, which I definitely think it can, because we see great games out of all these guys, and we know that the ability is there. Sometimes that helps your defenseman out as well, because sometimes you maybe try and get a little overconfident or overzealous when you're trying to make sure that you're playing mistake-free back for your goaltender.
Yeah, and you want to be able to take control of maybe 1 or 2 more aspects of your game that you start to solidify going down the stretch. And, well, you've been gifted a really nice schedule here at the end of January. Well, I guess an opportunistic schedule. Your next 6 games are all against the 2 teams ahead of you in the standings. But at the same time, the Oilers have a game in hand here against Utah and Allen right now, and that's important, right? I mean, you're sitting at about 29 points across the board for those teams, and hey, here's 3 straight this weekend against Utah, and then next weekend it's 3 straight against Allen. 4 out of those 6 games are on home ice, and if you want to take control of that tier of the standings right now, this is it. And this is it more so than it could ever be. You're starting to see that separation of maybe Idaho and Wichita in their own little tier, Rapid City and Kansas City creating a consistent season enough so where they're solidified in playoffs, and then Allen, Utah, and Tulsa are still trying to figure it out. And this is a chance to grab hold and say, hey, we are going to get ourselves out of this tier of the standings, and we're going to show that we're better than the bottom tier of teams right now. So Tulsa's got a really, really good opportunity. If you want to be gifted something for big 4-point swings, you've got it right here at the end of the month. And of course, we got a lot of fun stuff coming up on home ice. We got the Nickelodeon night on Saturday. Of course, we've got a great doubleheader on Sunday as well. So, if you're looking to get out and see motivational hockey, I think the Oilers are going to take a deep breath here at the All-Star break, recognize what they have in front of them, and I think they're going to find a way to take advantage of it.
And we also see the youth jersey giveaway night on Saturday as well. So first 1,000 kids 12 and under that are in attendance and when they come through the door, will be able to get a free youth jersey, which is always a big night, always exciting night. And with that, we'll see probably a pretty good crowd on hand, and this team has played really well in front of the big crowds on the campaign. We say, talk about Utah, got a game in hand coming in. They've been struggling, but as of late, they've looked a little bit better. I think that comes down to Trent Miner being available between the pipes is the same as Lucas Parikh, who we saw last season with the Rapid City Rush. And before that, they were relying on Eric Dott for a couple of games, and he had similar numbers here in Allen as he did in Utah. They just released him not super long ago, and Trent Miner's been a goaltender, as we've seen, that's taken over games before. We saw it happen in the playoffs especially.
Yeah, just last year, right? I mean, Trent Miner was a big piece of that playoff win, and, the Oilers got the best of him on occasion for sure, but the Colorado Avalanche, I think 100% have their eyes still on Trent Miner for sure, and, of course the Eagles do just as well in Colorado, and so you've got to evaluate him game by game if you're Utah, right? And right now he's helping this team win hockey games and get back to where they once were. They lost a lot of firepower last year. Of course, Dastu, I still would say from my own personal perspective, he just about won the series for Utah by himself last year with his playoff production. But you don't have that anymore. He went to Europe, and you got to find production elsewhere. And so they're still searching for that piece to the puzzle for sure, just as well on their back end. But it'll be our first opportunity to see them live, and it'll be the fans' first opportunity to see them live, most likely. So be sure to know what this weekend means. Of course, if you're coming on out to the games, it means a lot, and this is a part in the season where the next 6 games are going to tell a lot because, well, the 6 games after also are going to tell a lot. You've got 6 straight against Idaho to start February.
That's a really difficult to start to February, and they're a team that. While they have one of those guys I was talking about in Ryan Dominski, who is in the top 7 in point production so far on the season, but they spread it around quite a bit. Obviously, he's a really fantastic player, but their depth is really terrifying. There's a reason why they've gotten off to one of the best starts in ECHL history through the first half of the year. And so, we'll have to keep an eye on that. We talked about Dastu, but Martin also gone, who we saw with Jacksonville this year on their back end. And the back end can be kind of a make or break for you when it comes to production as well. And we saw Jared Hilderman score his first goal of this season not too long ago through his 13 games. Of course, he played 14 up in San Diego earlier in the campaign. And then, of course, Kyler Wall's come in here and has already found the back of the net twice.
Yeah, Kyler Wall's been really fun to watch. Just talking to him personally just as well. I mean, that's the kind of guy you like to have, around your team who's trying to find their way back in it. A lot of good leadership here in Tulsa right now, and that is certainly step number 1 you cannot skip in a task to get back into the playoff picture for sure. I mean, you kind of just look at the schedule. It looks fun upcoming. I mean, the second half of the schedule, of course, February is going to be a tough month, but March is kind of all over the place, right? You got a Central Division road trip. You'll take on Cincinnati and Kalamazoo on the road to start March. And then we get Cincinnati at home for the first time ever in franchise history. So that'll be fun, for Oilers fans that maybe don't get to travel very often or have never gone up to Cincinnati for a game. Here's your first chance to see them in March. And, it's not a division game, but that's a playoff caliber team that, you're going to have to prove something against on home ice just as well. The team will have a trip up to Maine on the 31st of March and the 1st and 2nd of April just as well. And, of course, the Tulsa Oilers football season will be starting up by then already, so it'll be a good mesh. But right now, I look at the next 6 games for Tulsa, and, this is what you play the game for right here, is to be able to prove moments like this that you can build on them.
Yeah, and the nice part about playing outside of your division, of course, you don't get the 4-point swing by pulling another team kind of down, essentially by burning a game for themselves and getting yourself the 2 points. But when you're out of division, it's not as big of a deal, I guess, if you lose, but especially in overtime. It's, giving the other team a point, it doesn't affect you, at least in terms of where you're sitting at in terms of the playoff standings. And so that could be a bit of an advantage, of course. We lose that swing, and then you get to play a totally different style team than what you've seen all season at the end there with Maine.
Yeah, no doubt, and it's a chance for not only the Oilers to take a deep breath, but for the fan base too, and look forward to the second half of the year. Tulsa is 8 points out of a playoff spot right now. For those that are new to the game and don't know the system quite yet, of course, 2 points for a win. You're pretty much 4 games out, and you play 4 games a week, right? You have a really good week, you might be able to chip away at half of that work at minimum, and you're right back in it. So the month of January is going to be a massive month. We'll have to look ahead to see how the Kansas City Mavericks do here in the upcoming days just as well. If you want to keep an eye on a Mountain Division rival, keep an eye on Kansas City. They're sitting in the 4th and final playoff spot right now, and Tulsa's hunting them. So a lot to look forward to. Of course, Youth Night here on Saturday, and if you want to be a part of that, we got some awesome stuff going on. The Superstars, giant inflatable mascots, will be back at it for sure. Friday night's Ladies Night, as always, and then Sunday, I get to watch some OSU hockey at noon, and then, of course, Oilers hockey at 4, so get all the hockey you could ever want on a Sunday.
Yeah, certainly so, and it's not all just at the BOK Center this weekend either. The Battle of the Breweries tournament starts on Saturday, of course. OSU is also playing directly after that at 10:30 p.m. at the Oilers Ice Center. And so, if you can't make it out to the BOK for one reason or another on one of those days, maybe catch yourself out at the Oilers Ice Center. You can still watch some really good hockey. And if you missed the announcement, Oklahoma State University now using Tulsa as kind of their home domain, the Oilers Ice Center, their main rink. This will be the last game this season, from what I can tell, that they'll be playing at the BOK Center, the one at 12:15 on the Sunday. And with that, you just have to have a ticket to the Oilers game, and you can get into the OSU game at the BOK Center for free, and then $10 tickets at the door on Saturday night at the BOK Center as well for their game. They'll both be up against Texas State, and it should be a very exciting weekend here in the month of January. I mean, it's jam-packed across both buildings.
Yeah, to say the least, for sure. So get ready for a really exciting second half of the year. Certainly a lot of good things on and off the ice upcoming. And of course, tweet at us what's your favorite moment of the first half of the season. What are you looking forward to the most just as well? Tag Zack or Luke on Hockey Family and let us know too if you want. At the end of the day, we love interacting with you guys, of course, and it's one of those moments where I think there's a lot of optimism around the corner here for a second half of the season, and some affiliated help on this team is going to go a long way, without a doubt. So get ready for the Grizzlies on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we'll look forward to it.
Yeah, we will catch you guys out at the BOK Center or the Oilers Ice Center this weekend. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Pipeline Podcast, brought to you by OilFire Whiskey.